Hi everyone, welcome back to my lab and today's video, which is going to be my first impressions and look at the brand new Colored Raine Juicy Boost palette. In this video, I'm going to create 3 eye looks for you. I'm going to do one on each eye and then I will share how I created this eye look completely. I will also compare it to some other Colored Raine palettes that I have in my collection and let you know my thoughts. Before we get into the video, if you're new here, I'm Yori. Thank you for clicking on this video. I hope you're going to enjoy this one and consider subscribing to my channel. I'm going to leave my social media links. I've been sharing a lot more on Instagram, so if you haven't already, be sure and follow me there and consider subscribing to my channel if you haven't already. Also, I want to thank my first 5 commenters from my previous video. I've been doing this a lot lately and I've been having a lot of fun with it. Thank you so much to those of you that are showing my little channel some lab love. I really appreciate it, and those that have a YouTube channel will be linked in the description box and demonstrated with the YouTube logo. Now let's get into this video. I purchased my palette from Colored Raine on launch day and I paid $55 with 56 cents. Now the price of the palette is actually $52, but then I used Hotfire's discount code for $5.20 off, but then there was shipping tax, you know, everything said and done, I paid $55.56, and there were 2 versions of the palette available. I chose the flat lay version and this is what the outer box looks like. I don't know if it's the word juicy, but it reminds me of like bubblegum packaging, like juicy fruit or something, but I think it's very cute and it was inspired by the owner's love of juicing. Incidentally, it came with a little pamphlet with some recipes for juices, which they look delicious. I might try some. I chose the flat lay palette. This is what they're calling the flat lay palette, so it's a little bit bigger. They did have kind of a bifold palette, which was a double-sided palette option, but the shades inside would be exactly the same and you have the option to choose your preference. I'm curious to know which one you chose. I decided to go with the flat lay palette, which looks like this. This is the palette that comes inside. I do like that all of the ingredient information and the shade names are on the back rather than on the outer carton, which does reflect the outside packaging of the palette as well, because if you choose not to retain cartons, you still have all of the necessary information here on the back side. Now this one is listed to be a pressed pigment and shadow palette, so you're going to have some shades that are not intended for use around the immediate eye area, and usually that has to do with the pigments that they're using or the dyes, but I've never had any trouble with any product like that, and I've also come to learn that in the EU those ingredients are just fine, so maybe the FDA is just a little behind the times. You do have 18 shades and they are 1.25 grams, so you have 23 grams of total product, and here's what the palette looks like. It does come with a plastic insert, a very nice full-size mirror, and here are your shades. I'm very delicate with my makeup, and believe it or not, this is after using the palette to create 3 looks. It still looks brand new, which I like to keep my makeup looking as new as possible, and I have so much of it as well that I can't get that much use out of every single palette, but I think this is a lovely palette, lovely color story, and when I saw it, I knew I was going to have to grab it. As I mentioned, the double-sided palette would then just slice the palette in half and have 1 and 1 on each side. Me personally, I like to look at all my options to really get inspiration for what options I have. One thing I did notice while I was working with the palette is that if you go across each row, you definitely have a complete look with very, very cohesive colors that go and blend together really, really well. So it's a nice start, and you're not looking at just a rainbow palette where you may not know where to begin. There's definitely a starting point with the colors here. Now we have only 3 shimmers in this palette, which is the first column here. Everything else is going to be a matte. Another really nice touch to the palette is that the pans are magnetized inside the palette, so should you want to remove them and place them in their book of shadows, for instance, which is their magnetic palette, you could definitely do so and travel with the palette as well. Now, even though it is a pretty sizable palette, I don't think it's prohibitive in terms of travel. Not that anyone's traveling right now, but if you wanted to carry it with you at the bottom of your makeup bag or laying upright on the side, it would work just fine. For size comparison, I have one of my absolute favorite palettes ever. This is the Colored Raine Safari Rain palette, and you can see that the width is about the same, but the Juicy Boost palette is just a little bit longer. Colored Raine makes one of my favorite formulas in terms of shimmers, and so when I saw that they were releasing this palette and it had shimmers, I really wanted it. Even though there's a lot more mattes here, there are 3 shimmers and I knew I was going to want those. I was curious if it was going to be similar to their pigments, which they released a while ago, and this is more of a rainbow palette. So if you you look at this here, I have like the original launch where you would get the individual shades and then you would put them in the magnetic palette. Since then, this is now released as a palette itself where you place the shades and they're already in there. I'm not sure if they're going to be discontinuing this, but I do own it. I did review it on my channel and I really like it. You can see I kind of arranged mine in a similar style but in columns this time. I was wondering if it was going to be similar, but I found that actually it's not that similar with the exception of the pinks. So with the pinks you do have a little bit of similarity, but the pigments are going to be more on the warm side, and in this palette they're going to be a little bit more on the cool tone side. In terms of blues, this is going to be your better option. This one only has 2 blues, 1 matte, 1 shimmer. So those are my initial thoughts on the palette. Let's go ahead and create the look so that you can see how the shades perform, and then I will be back at the end to share my final thoughts. Looking at the palette, I know I want to use this blue on my lid today. I'm kind of in the mood for something blue like that, maybe with some of these neutrals, so I'm going to steer away from those colors for this first look. And let's use some of the pinks. Today I'm using Milani's eyeshadow base, and let's go ahead and use pink grapefruit. So right off the bat, I'm noticing this is a very pastel shade. It has a slight mauvey tinge, but it's going to be great to blend out the other colors in this specific row. I did notice that the shades are aligned kind of in a row, that you can definitely get a beautiful look if you stick to the horizontal rows of the palette, but obviously you can get a little more creative and mix and match. But it's nice that they gave you kind of a starting point, especially with a larger eyeshadow palette. It's kind of nice to have options. I'm going to the next deepest shade, which is Cranberry Vanilla, and I'm going to start to apply that on the outer corner. And this one has a little bit more red in it than it appeared in the palette. So I'm just going to apply this right over top into the crease. I'm going to also apply this shade along the lower lash line. Last but not least, I'm taking Apple Strawberry to deepen out the outer V. I do like that they have a very dark shade. It's a green shade, but it's almost black, and so you can definitely use that to deepen out your outer corner if that's how you like to do your eye makeup. Once I have most of that pigment down, I'm going to go ahead and diffuse out the color. I'm going to take a slightly smaller brush and see how that dark shade Kale Yeah would work to deepen out the outer corner. Now these are red and green and not necessarily shades that are easy to blend, but I just want to get a feel for if I can use this color kind of like I would a black in the palette. It's getting just a little bit muddy, but again, that is a result of my color choice. And I will go back into Apple Strawberry and go over that a little bit. It's a very nicely blended pink look. And I think I'll go ahead and use the pink metallic. It is called Sweet Ruby. Now, Colored Raine's metallic is where I think the brand really shines. Look at that. It's so shiny. I'm going to go ahead and apply it to my eye. Okay, it has kind of a chunky texture, which is smoothing out as I press it on. This is kind of the texture that you get from like the Touch and Soul shadows, but also it has a very beautiful shine to it. So these are not the metallics like liquid metal that swatch for days. They're more of a chunky shade, but wow, that really packs a punch. That's really incredible. I don't know why I'm surprised. I already know I like the brand, but I wasn't expecting a shade like that. I was expecting something more metallic. Now I'm just applying a little bit more of the red shade. I am getting quite a bit of kick up in the pan. Let me show you. So before I blow it away, you can see that some of the shades that I have used, they have a little bit of powder kick up in the pan. It's not a deal breaker for me, but if you don't like powdery shadows, that's something to keep in mind. And I'm just going to diffuse this a little further. I'm also going to take a little bit of that darker shade and run it along the lower lash line to just deepen it up. I'm not going to apply liner or mascara or anything for these looks. I just want you to get an idea for how the shades perform. And I want to get a feel for the palette by using, you know, more than just a few shades. That metallic really packed a punch. I do feel that after a while you might develop hard pan from pressing into it. It's just an interesting texture, different for color grain. And this will be the first look using some of the pinks. I like it. It's very pretty. Let's try something in a slightly different shape for a halo. And I'm going to use maybe the green shadows. So let's go ahead and start with Mint Leaves. So I started this time with the darker shade. I'm going to also take a little bit of Cucumber Avocado to just diffuse the edges just a little bit. This one is more of a pastel green. And we're going to apply the Mint Leaves under the lower lash line as well. Just kind of on the inner and outer corner in the typical halo shape. These shadows, the greens, are a lot less powdery than the other shadows I was working with before for the pink look. Now that the pink look has been sitting on my eye for a little while, it kind of looks like it's melting into the eye, which is nice. And now I'm going to use Kale Yeah to deepen out the outer V. Out of all the names that are here, that's the one that bothers me the most. I just feel silly saying Kale Yeah. Other than that, the names are pretty cute. This look is definitely a lot more smoky. I'm working with darker shadows, and these are a little bit more difficult to blend. Seems like a slightly more dry formula, but that's not unusual for green. Now I'm just going to give it one more blend using Mint Leaves, and then I'm going to use the gold shimmer in the center. This one has more of the typical color green metallic formula. You can see here, very metallic, and I'm going to apply that on the center. It does have kind of a similar texture to the pink, but for some reason this one is a little less flaky, in my opinion. I do want to deepen the outer corners just a little bit, what was lost as I was applying the shimmer. Very beautiful. And I'm actually going to try to apply that same gold to the lower lash line using a brush. It is applying, but it's flaking a little bit more. Now, of course, I don't have any concealer on my lower lash line right now or eyeshadow base down there, so it doesn't really have much to stick to. I would definitely want to have something for it to stick to a little bit more just to avoid some of that fallout, especially when working with a brush. I do want to put a little bit more of that darker green underneath just to intensify the halo effect. For something that I created rather quickly, this is pretty nice. I love green eyeshadow, and so I'm really kind of loving that look. It's very nice. Okay, not too bad. Of course, I'm going to edit this down, but it really only took me about 15 minutes to create both looks. And again, I was creating as I was going. I had no game plan. So it's pretty easy to use the palette. I like that they have those color gradients so far because it makes things easier to blend. And yeah, this is where we are right now. I like it. Very different looks, right? You can definitely see the fallout that I'm experiencing here, mostly with the pink though, because I just found it to be a little flaky. But it looks beautiful. I would definitely use a little bit of glitter glue, although it's been settling in quite nicely. The glitters are really beautiful. I think I would buy a palette with just those. I'm going to go ahead and clean up, and then we'll come back and do the real look. So again, we're primed with the Milani eyeshadow base, and this is the look that we're going to create. I had a little bit more trouble getting the green to layer over other shadows with this look. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to, on this eye, actually put the green down first. I'm just going to put it on the outer corner to make sure that I can get it to layer, because I have a little bit of patchiness on the other side when I tried to layer over the brown shades. So this one is, again, Kale Yeah, which I still hate saying that name. So hopefully you can see that going down on its own on an unset eyeshadow base, it's not giving me any patchiness problems. So I'm going to leave it like that, and then I'm going to repeat the other steps that I did on the other eye, which the first thing that I did was go in with the shade Ginger Bay and that is the shade that I applied initially throughout my crease. It's not the lightest in the yellow family, but it's one of the lighter ones. If you like to use that technique where you work your way from the deepest shade to the lightest shade, which can create a very beautiful diffused look as well, then you might want to go all the way to the lightest shade. But since I am applying this one and it's pretty close to my skin tone, I'm going to go ahead and use this as my transition. And then I'm going to go into turmeric shot and I'm going to deepen that a little bit more. This is a really great kind of like mac and cheese color. I actually really like it. If you like yellow eyeshadow looks, you can get a beautiful yellow eyeshadow look from the palette as well. Working my way up the gradient, now we're using orange carrot, and you can see this is what gives the eye look that warmth. Now originally I had used the shade Sweet Potato Mango on the outer corner here, and then I layered the Kale Yeah shade over it, and that's what created that patchiness that I wasn't really too keen on. So I'm just applying that darkest shade just on the outsides of the green shade, and then I'll re-intensify the green a bit. I think I'll even apply the blue shimmer and then intensify the green after that. The mattes are blending into each other beautifully, but obviously they're within the same color family. So what I did for the blue, the Blueberry Burst shade, I went in with a brush first, but then I did end up intensifying it with my fingers to get stronger payoff. So first with the brush. And when I'm doing this, I did get a little bit of fallout, just so that you're aware. Again, just because of the way that I'm working with the color. Also, for my last few looks that I've done on my channel, I have done something a little bit more graphic and a little more structured. And so this time I wanted to do something that was more freehand without formally cutting the crease or anything like that, just to give you options for different types of looks that you can do. Now, if you wanted a very, very clean cut crease, you could obviously do that with this color. So this is about the color intensity that I get using a brush, which is pretty good. And again, I'm going over unset eyeshadow base, but that unset eyeshadow base did have a little bit of the matte colors that, you know, kind of just work their way down as I'm working with the shadow. I do like the effect of putting the deeper shade down first. Now I'm going to go ahead and go in with my finger just to intensify the metallic shade, and it applies beautifully. This one is more similar to typical colored Raine metallics in that it gives you more of that molten metal kind of look. So the eye look seems to be coming together fine. When I was working on it, I was like, man, I like the other looks that I did much better, but now it's starting to come along. Like one of you was telling me in my other video, gotta trust the process. So I'm using the Scott Barnes brush just to give me the illusion of a cut crease, but again, this isn't something that I actually cut out with concealer or anything like that. So I'm satisfied with the metallic intensity, and now I want to go ahead and try to deepen out the outer V and hope that I'm not going to get that patchiness. So back with Kale Yeah, I'm going to go ahead and go over this shade. Some of that metallic did make its way out here to the outer corner, so I'm going to go ahead and deepen it. And yeah, I'm not getting that patchiness problem at all. I would just say if you're having a little bit of trouble, then put down the deepest shade first, and then you can always work your way to the lightest one, and that'll give you a beautiful gradient as well. I think it's working out much better. I was worried a little bit at first, but I did use this shade in my other look and it didn't give me that same problem. So it's just a matter of what shade you happen to be blending it with, because yeah, I could see that, see over here, over the Sweet Potato Mango, it's a little bit patchy on this side, and I'm not experiencing that here at all. So that would just be my advice when working with the palette. I'm very happy with the way that this is looking so far. I'm going to finish off my eyes by applying a little bit of the Makeup Revolution. This is the eyeliner. It's a felt liner that kind of dips into the product, and then the mascara today is also from Makeup Revolution. It's called the Mascara Revolution. Not a fan of this wand though. Look at this wand. It's kind of asymmetric. I guess it's for those people who kind of twirl the mascara wand as they're applying mascara, but I have a tendency to just brush it through. So that's what I'm going to do, and I did apply falsies today. I also used Marc Jacobs eyeliner on the inner rim just to make sure that everything fuses together really well. So I'm going to take care of that, apply my lashes, do my face makeup, which will be linked in the description box down below for you if you're interested in seeing other products that I'm using, and we'll be back to do the lower lash line. So here's where we are in the makeup. I'm taking the shade Energy Boost, which is that blue. It kind of stands alone in the palette, and I am applying it on the lower lash line all the way across and blending it downward. I still have a little bit of that gold glitter in my lower lash line, but that's okay. And now I'm going to stamp a little bit of the Kale Yeah shade along the lower lash line, just on the outer corner. Just wanted to give me a little bit of drama on the outer corner there. And I'm going to take the metallic Blueberry Burst shade, and I'm going to apply that on the inner corner and a little bit on the inner lower lash line, just to bring a little bit of light and glimmer to that part of my look. I did apply eyeliner, MAC Chromographic pencil. These are the best. They are so good. This is High Def Cyan, which is a little bit more blue, whereas my eye is looking a little bit turquoise, but it'll still do. I think it still looks nice. I'm just gonna go in with that mascara. And this is your finished look up close. I like how it turned out. I feel like it's one last hurrah for summer, which I'm already pining for summer. Starting to get a little bit colder, only in the 80s here in Chicago. I like it toasty in the 90s, so that's it for the finished look. I would love to hear which look you liked best. I know I didn't finish the other looks applying liner, mascara, and things like that, but more so than anything else, I wanted to give you an idea of how versatile the palette might be and how the other shades performed. I would love to know which look was your personal favorite, and if you picked up the palette, what you're thinking about it. I will be right back with my final thoughts on the palette. I hope you enjoyed seeing how I created the looks. I had a lot of fun playing with the palette. I was discovering it as I went along, as you noticed. So my comments regarding the palette is that some of the shades are a bit powdery. Even though I go in with a very light hand, they do kick up a little bit of dust in the pan, so that's just something to keep in mind. I also found that I was missing kind of deepening shades when I was working with the rose, and I was resorting to using the shade Kale Yeah, which I still don't like that name, to deepen out all of them. And as you saw, I had much more success on this eye, where I put that green, that deep green shade down first and then blended other colors over it, rather than reverse and trying to pack it on top of other colors that were not in the same color family. The other comment that I had is that these metallics are not the typical color grain metallics. I still love them. I would definitely buy a palette of these. They pack a punch in terms of the sheen and the shimmer, especially this pink one. It reminds me a lot of those Artist Couture Diamond Lights finishers, where it's a little bit flaky, but when you press it in, it kind of melts, and it has such a beautiful effect. I would definitely purchase a collection of these shimmers for sure. The mattes perform as you would expect. They are very, very blendable, and I do like how they selected the colors so that you have your gradients kind of built in when you don't want to spend too much time getting creative. Now, you definitely can. I mixed rose when I was creating this look, and I really am pleased with the result. I've always wanted to have an eye look like this. I've never really done it, even though they're pretty popular, and this one inspired me to do it. It was very easy to create, and I'm very happy with the finished look. If you were trying to make a decision between the pigments or the Juicy Boost palette, I would definitely go with the Juicy Boost palette, just because it gives you that versatility of having those metallic shades so that you don't have to have an all matte look. Now, of course, if you have multiple palettes, you can mix and match and use this with other products in your collection, that's for sure. But if you were picking one or the other, I do find that the quality here is just as good as that one. The shades are a little bit more on the pastel side, a little bit lighter. Some of these are more on the primary side of the color spectrum, if you can take a look there, except for the pinks. So I only found overlap with the pinks, and like I mentioned here, they're going to be a little bit more warm toned, and in the Juicy Boost, they're going to be a little bit more cool toned. So my first impression of the palette is very good. I gave you my tips for working with it already. I think the color selection was really nice. I especially love this bottom row here. So if you wanted to do something warm neutral, you definitely could, and if you wanted to get that murky green look, you also could do that as well. Those are my initial thoughts on the palette. Let me know what you thought down below, and what your preference was, if it was for the double-sided palette or for the flat lay palette. I'm curious to know which one was more popular. Like I said, I do prefer to see all my options laid out in front of me, so I went with the flat lay palette, and I am not one bit sorry. I'm enjoying my palette. I love the looks I created today. Both of the first ones that I did were really beautiful, really impactful, really bold, which surprised me with only 3 metallics in the palette. I was really surprised at how I was able to achieve those looks. But you can definitely do something softer, definitely do an all matte look as well. I think the palette is really nice. If you were interested in it, I don't think you will be sorry. That's everything for this video. If you have any questions for me, leave those in the comments section down below. Don't forget to follow me on Instagram. I'm loving engaging with you on Instagram. I've been posting a lot more frequently, so hopefully you're enjoying seeing my content there as well. Thank you again for joining me for today's video. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button if you haven't already. I hope you're doing very well, staying safe and healthy, and I look forward to seeing you again very, very soon on my next one. Bye-bye.